really, when we talk about it, when you're talking about technology and the good and bad of it, right? Uh, Even people that don't believe in a god or a devil see the evil
being done.
apparent in something. It may not be best. It's not optimum. When I was a mental health counselor, I avoided using words like good or bad because, well, they're just kind of useless in the work, right? Um, I hung on optimal and less optimal, right?
Okay.
And in that way, you know, anything that kind of um, does damage to your progression is obviously not optimal. And yet, we can go out and drink and we can have all these things in moderation. Well, going back to the Ecclesiastes is like all things are permissible. Not all things are beneficial. And there's that. Well, we can't put Pandora back in the closet. It can't go back, right? And I know that people would say, "Oh man, if we could only do that." And the truth is, we wouldn't survive if we could. An interesting writer wrote. I was not a survivalist, but in the military, I had to go through survival school and training, and it always interested me how some people could get, let's say, lost and make it, and other people could be lost for just a matter of hours and die. They could be lost for months and emerge, from that. Whereas some people go out for a day hike, upon realizing that they're lost, they succumb. And you're like, I mean, the body wants to survive and thrive, so it doesn't seem logical. But what the author talks about is that there have been people that have gone to primitive camping. You heard about that, Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Primitive camping. So, they don't bring anything and they're really just trying to be primitive back in
Yeah.
the day, what it would be
Survival.
like.
Yeah.
Survival, that.
Yeah.
And there have been people that said, you know what, I'm going to kind of turn off the whole world and I'm going to live that way. I'm going to go back to simpler, easier times. And if you ever saw Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeves, did you see that, Forrest, back in the
Man, that
day?
was I haven't that was in high school when I saw that.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. It was the 80s. But he basically is able to transcend time by ridding himself of the world he's living in and focusing on the time he wants to go to. And so he is able to do that, and he goes back because he meets the love of his life, who's like 100, and he goes back to see her. The point is that I don't want to I don't want to ruin it for anybody that wants to see that movie, but it's worth the
I'm
look.
not like you can. I don't know about Forrest, but you can be a
It's a
stiller.
beautiful,
I
wonderful
like
movie.
it. Doesn't bother me from not
Okay.
seeing it. So tell me,
Well, yes, but other people are
like
listening to
Forrest.
this. Like
That's
Oh,
I'm
true. That's true.
speaking about those folks, and I would say, man, go watch the movie. It's
what
a
is
bit
it called?
dated. It's called Somewhere in Time.
It's Christopher Reeve,
I'm
Right.
gonna
who's
super.
R.I.P.
And interestingly enough, the guy who wrote it is the same author of I Am Legend.
Oh wow.
If you're
Oh,
into that, right? Yeah, I know.
yeah.
It's like, what? Where does this come from, right? So uh, the bottom line is this: that the guy that these people that have gone out there to erase society and go back to the basics of life, God and the dirt and the hands and because we did it before, they succumb. There's a point where the brain starts to eat itself, right? They start to devolve, and it's like you know a pretty definitive proof that the people that they've seen that there has been a shrinking of the brain, and these people that were very adept at survival, and we're talking people that have tried, gone a year or two, right? I think a year is kind of where they tap out. And it's because we just aren't there anymore. We've transcended that time. And it is, I think it's kind of harkens back to, God saying, don't look up to the mountains for me. Don't look to the sky. I'm right here. Right. And I think that that's what you could take away from from Solomon saying there's nothing new under the sun. But it is hard knowing that he didn't have to deal with cell phones and cars and all of these things, and the ways that we have the mechanisms we have developed for good that we've turned to evil. I think he could conceive that. I think he'd be like, yeah, no, you're going to build this and they're going to use it for something wrong. But I don't think that he could possibly, I think he would be dumbfounded with all the wisdom that God had given him. And that leads us kind of, well, what do we do? Right? How do we manage that thing? And Elizabeth, this topic is brought to you by Elizabeth, by the way, again, because she's always thinking. And what we're going to get into is basically that, these things that arrive for adults that are not new to our children typically. And our children end up mastering these things and it looks all fine and good, right? But to our grandmother, she ain't gonna know what a chat room is, or like she's just gonna be like, "What are you doing?" It would be a mystical thing, and I think it's for us, it's drinking from the fire hose too, because you're like, "Hey, well, I hear you talking in there. I thought you were playing a game, right?" And you're like, "Who are you talking to?" "Well, I'm talking to Chad," right? What? Who's Chad? Well, he's a 13-year-old kid. Turns out Chad's not a 13-year-old kid. He's a 30-year-old kid, who is trying to lure children out of the home, which is basically what is happening. Elizabeth, as you brought this up, you were really excited when you were talking about the topic. Do you want to take us through, your mindset and how, it became of interest to you?
Yeah. P.S. Side note, you're going to want to edit this part out. But I thought Craig said that we were talking about the Tom Homan thing.
No,
that was supposed to be the discussion today.
He got sidelined. I remember him saying those things, and I remember redirecting him saying, "Hey, no, I really think that this is something we could build upon because obviously the Homan thing and." Is we could split it. We could split it. I remember saying we could kind of split the topic, and go with what's happening in the world today, with the Holman stuff, because it is, important. But yours was just so much more intriguing to me.
Because, yeah, no, I'm glad I already previously did research.
Yeah, well, please bring it if you had.
So I got on and I was just looking. Like when I got into the deep fake stuff, I got into what was going on in chat rooms. And then there's all this stuff coming out that they're in these games that our kids are playing. They're in something as simple as Roblox. It's in Fortnite. Like they create chat rooms. They create other things where you can do some massively inappropriate things. And these are children playing. Like my 7-year-old nephew plays Roblox all the time. And his dad is a police officer, so he's super on top of it, which is great. But it's so simple for him to get into these other rooms. Like I had this discussion with my kids, like, do you guys know about this? They were like, no, we only play this version. Like we showed you. I'm super on top of, like, you're not talking to anybody I don't know. If this is not a friend from school that you can show me and I can verify that it is him or one of my immediate family members, you won't be talking. If they send you a message, you will block it and then delete them. Like I don't let them get into, like, they play live games, but it has to stay muted because, oh my gosh, like you hear some of these children's mouths or grown adults on there having conversations with them. And I'm like, nah, just when I've played with them. And I'm like, they're like, so can we? And I'm like, yeah. So we tried it a few times and I was like, that won't ever happen again.
Yeah. Ever. It's interesting that even on the regular daily traffic, you have grown adults who are obviously grown adults getting into arguments with 9-year-olds who are winning this argument, right? Because once you get into it with a 9-year-old, like who's just, and you could just hear them getting angry and angry. It is an unhealthy milieu to be in, obviously. I'm with you. I cannot stand to hear other people talking while I'm trying to kill people on Xbox. I don't want to hear anything else, right? And plus, because I got nothing to say to them, and I don't want to have a friend I don't know who that is. But the kids, this is kind of so norm for them, and you've mitigated that a lot. But I would say that most parents are, they may be aware, but it might be a bit of a willful, like, as long as the house doesn't burn down. And it's like, well, it's got to be better than the house burning down, because the story that I just read, which was a recent story, a 12-year-old girl was in a online relationship through Roblox, and thinking she's talking to another 12-year-old person, and
Yeah.
inevitably offers, because is teasing out of her all of the angst that a young person has, and then saying, yeah, girl, you should leave, right? Excuse me, but leave. We could come get you. Now, that's the problem with children, is that they don't have the like time and the wisdom that it comes with it. They haven't been bitten by a lot of snakes, so they're not really scared of it. But I find that to be terrifying, because how much of the problems we're having with our children are fostered, at least, in these places. What do you think, Forrest?
I think that we're very simple creatures. And with that, it's easy to, I can go back when I was a kid. I was 12, 13, 14 years old, and I had a stepsister. And we complained about our parents because they were mean, because they wouldn't let us do what we couldn't stay out too late. We always had to be up early for church. They had rules, and we complained about the rules. Looking back on that, I realized my parents did a wonderful job raising us. All the things that I thought were horrible were the same things as a parent that I would apply to my own kids. And so, but look at the limited scope of communication I had. I had my stepsister, that's it. Maybe my friends, we could complain about our parents. That was it. You have an unlimited access to people, to it's like the mob rules mentality.
Oh yeah.
And what's interesting too, JT, is I feel like parents are competing with so many forces, with the school systems, with teachers, with other kids. We're battling. When you and I, we grew up with our parents saying, "Because I said so," right?
Yeah. Right. Don't come back until dinner time. Get out of the house, right? And you're like, but to do what? It's like, I don't know, play in the dirt. You're like, okay.
What's funny is that we did some crazy stuff. I remember taking a shotgun shells and disassembling them and trying to build, bombs with the materials, unsuccessfully, thankfully.
Well, yeah, right. And why? Because boredom is, look, that's equally as dangerous, right? So to go back and say things haven't changed. Kids have no concept of, like, this might really go bad for me, right? Oh, my friends are breaking into that house to, make out with girls. Okay. Who owns that? I don't know. I'm following Chad. So you go in, and next thing you know, somebody's coming and cops are there. Now the cops are involved. Now this is a personal story. And you're like, kids scatter like roaches, through every portal there is. And your mom gets a call saying your son, blah, 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 because that's pretty much as far as it went with the police, despite the fact that we were breaking laws. It was just, okay, because those kids, the ones that were now police and all that, they were like, well, they're bored kids. What do they got to do? Right. They're, yes, a bored child is a dangerous child, dangerous to themselves. Right. And certainly, you can watch your relationships just, depending on who's feeding that child their thoughts,
Right.
I mean, that's what we're really talking about. And
so what you're saying is that our self-manifestation, left to our own devices, is safer, even though we did some crazy stuff, than this group think with unlimited access to whatever.
Sure. I think there were control. If you think about it, Elizabeth is a controlling system manager in her home in a world that I didn't have to grow up in, right? Or that at least when I was a younger parent, I didn't have to worry about. I do now a little bit, but when we were kids, there were a limit to the amount of input you could get. You had one phone line in your house, one, and people had to call you to say good or bad things about you, right?
And it had a cord.
It had a cord, so you were tethered. You're tethered
And it
to
was in the
that,
kitchen.
and
Yep.
your parents would lose their minds if you were on that thing for a long time,
Hmm.
right? They thought something is wrong with you, right? And look at what we're dealing with today. There's no point are these same kids, because it's us now, that there's that thing isn't on, telling us the time, whatever it is, right? It is an umbilicus, that I think to Elizabeth's point is like that if you don't throttle it, everything's going to come through that cord, poop, everything, and whereas when we were kids, there was a limit. Got to go home at 5 o'clock. And then it's like, you're not going to hear from your friends saying, your life sucks. My life sucks too. And it did happen where you were like, yeah, let's get on the road. Let's leave. Let's run away. But it was unsustainable. I ran away at 18 because I got my feelings hurt, realized I had nowhere to go and had to call home after showing my ass a bit and say, I'm sorry. And to have a parent who, I don't get along with my parents very well, but there have been key moments where they have really surprised me, where it was like, my dad said, come on home, where it could have been easily a 4-hour lecture of, you don't understand what we do for you. And I understand that. I understood it then too, because well, here it comes, right? Here it goes. But what we have today, it's like, it doesn't even compare, because they can escape in your house. They don't need to leave.
Well, think about it like this too, JT. When you left, when you were kids, many kids ran away. They packed their bag and their parents let them go around the block and eventually they come back home the same night. But today, kind of talking about what Elizabeth is talking about, as a child, I can foster a relationship with somebody who will take me in.
Yeah.
Not understanding how dangerous that is.
Right.
Yours and mine experience, and probably Elizabeth's experience, is that if you did run away, when we were kids, there was no credit cards. We were in a cash society, right? Yeah. So we're in a cash society. There wasn't a lot of options as far as where am I going to stay. I mean, you might be able to stay at a buddy, but the parents would immediately call your parents and say, hey, he's over here. How long do you want me to play this game? Give it a night or two. Right. They would be scheming. And so what's interesting is that with what Elizabeth's talking about, that access to an adult, and this is grooming, and grooming is unlimited. Yeah. Because I can convince a 12-year-old to leave their domicile, leave the safety of their family, and that they have options that are painted greater than the pain that they are amplifying, because that's what you do. Yeah. It's like I'm saying, hey, JT, your dad's mean. One of these days, he's going to punch you in the face. I could say things that you would buy into.
Right. I've seen marriages go to crap because of that. They befriend somebody who's got a crappy marriage, and all of a sudden their marriage doesn't seem so great. Where there was no real big giant problems. I would tell you that it's unfortunate that we are typically brought down by folks rather than brought up, but, improved. Because I think it has a lot to do with the ready, microwave. Like, I need to eat now, so I throw it in there, right? And anything you put in the microwave isn't going to be as good as what is slow cooked, in the oven. But because we have these extreme moments where we, oh, it's a now. It's easier for us to, do that. And so that in turn, it makes it easy for us to become friends with people we would have no business knowing, at all. And when you say, talk about children, what friends do they really have? Like, what do they really understand about friendship at all? Because it morphs and changes, it becomes ugly. It sometimes is real beautiful, but for the most part, they don't have a clue about what a friend is. They have a lot of. My daughter has truly a lot of friends. I see her having real friends. That makes me jealous because I'm like, how do you have this many people that care this much about you? Right? It seems unfair to someone like me where you had one or two people, in your life. But that's a testament of the quality of a person that she is. But it would be really scary uh, to have to, if I didn't have that, to have to worry because you have to, you have to, the things you don't, the question you're not asking, what is that? Whereas how would you know, if their behavior changed, that it's some 30-year-old jerk off on Roblox saying, yeah, it's not, hey man, that's not right. They shouldn't be able to do this to you. You got rights too. Kids saying, I have a right to, you got no rights. You own nothing. Like you are living, I am underwriting your life and I do it with love, right? But it isn't yours,
No,
until you write
I
your own
own
check.
you.
That's
That's
right.
what I tell
That's
my
right.
children. I own
And
you.
people are going to have a problem with that. But the fact is that that's what we must do with our kids. We must own them. We can't just go, oh, well, I think they're fine. Because you wouldn't do that to your priceless car, leave the keys in it, top down, engine running, And if you wouldn't do it with your car, well, you shouldn't do it with your children either. I mean, keep an eye on them. But there is that. And I think that the world today seems very overwhelming to even me to think about how, with the apps checking their phone every day, I would be a prison guard. It would feel like a prison guard. I know, Forrest, we talked about this, and you could add to this that delicate balance between being the prison guard and being the kind of Solomon loving guiding figure who is like all knowing and says, oh, my son hath returned, and all of that. Tell us about a little bit about that from your point of view.
Well, I will say this, life is interesting when you go through life and you learn, and if you could go back. And so listening to Elizabeth, she's a prison guard. And I
It's so
understand.
funny
And look,
that
I
you say
understand
that.
how what you did was you established the bar early on. And I wish I could have done that, because I can tell you as a parent, I've got young adults in my house now, and I still battle against social media and politics and religion and those sort of things. So I struggle, mainly because their logic chip is not operating. And
Right.
we learned early, one thing about face-to-face social interaction that we grew up with, you learn logic really quick. And the sign of a good friend, I could tell you, Craig and I, when we were kids, I mean, they had us in the boxing ring with big old gloves punching each other. That's true love. Whenever you can punch somebody and then be friends. But what you do is you're navigating all these different things that you physically have to navigate. It's very easy, or it's lazy to navigate on a keyboard.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a lot harder to do it when you're at school in front of people, or at church, or at camp.
Right.
And I can tell you, I mean, JT, I'm sure you do. I mean, I've had plenty of fights for and what happens is you understand boundaries. And I think boundaries are very important. We
Yep.
respected our parents. We respected the police. We may not have liked them. Okay. Like your dad, if we grew up in the same neighborhood, your dad was mean, and I may not have liked him, but I would respect him. I'd say, yes, sir, no, sir.
Right.
If your dad said be home by 10, we'd be home by 10. Right.
Right.
So I think that one of the problems that, every generation has is they have to live within the rules of engagement of what's there.
Yeah.
And if you could have a crystal ball, man, it would make our lives a lot easier. Like, who would have thought social media would have been such an impact on our kids when we were kids? Even when we were young adults, did we talk about politics? Did we talk
No.
about it in the church, especially? They
No.
never talked about politics in the church,
Yeah.
ever.
You know, you bring up an interesting point about community. Um, we our that bubble we were in was a neighborhood, and you know, coming from I lived in a fair suburban area, really nice, upper middle class area, and boy, you were polite because you knew that it'd get back to the people that could whip your ass and would put you in timeout, you know, which didn't exist. There was no timeout. It was go to your room until I get there to whip your ass, right? It was a whole
You want the
double
belt
layer.
or you want the switch?
Yeah, it's like, you know, and if you ever had the gauntlet of like you can choose to lose TV for 2 weeks or take the physical challenge, you know, like that's the most you got. But that community, I really think that that's what we're at the basis of all this is that the community has gotten immense, but less responsible.
Yeah.
Whereas we
Yeah.
had a smaller community, but a great responsibility not to screw it up. You know, if you got caught with your, you know, pants down, running around town, it was going to get back to somebody, and then you're gonna have to pay for it. So that the community responsibility was okay. There's, you know, I want to avoid pain. I certainly don't, you know, and that developed in us at that community level. Now the community is what they're able to be friends with people that don't live here. They're able to take you know, take somebody's advice who has no idea, right? The minute that they came out with like the I guess back in the day was threads or email things before there was
Like
kind of
RSS feeds or something like that.
well, it was just basically it was just like you got on a thread and you know people would go back and forth with it.
Yeah.
I'm drawing a blank, but that's when you know you're not relying on that community anymore. You've built this bigger community, but it's not authentic. You know, at least you, Elizabeth, as the prison guard, and I say that with all love and respect. You've kept control of a smaller community with more responsibility. So really, that's what we're talking about. How do we have less responsibility but a bigger community? You know, and I think it's an inverse relationship. You know, like have 2 friends, not 20.
Well, you know what? You know what competes with that, and what's problematic is you said it earlier. Is we see so much evidence of bad advice, and a great example is I see videos all the time of people getting pulled over by the police, and the police will say license and registration. Person won't even roll their window all the way down. They'll say, "Why are you pulling me over? Why are you pulling me over?" License and registration. And after about 17 times, they say, "I'm going to pull you out of that car. I'm going to arrest you. I'm going to put you in handcuffs, arrest you." And they still won't do it. And I'm sitting there, you and I, when we got pulled over, we were shaking in our boots, right? I was
yes.
always
When I was pulled
scared.
over, there was a time when that was the case. I'd shake in my boots about it.
So I feared them, but there's so many different scenarios that you see where people are, they've, for example, the customer is always right. You know, they've embedded that into the minds of people. The customer is always right. Well, we see more evidence where the customer is wrong, but they think they're right, and they make a fool of themselves. So what they've done, JT, is they've removed shame. Think about that. Nobody's embarrassed.
Well, that's an interesting thing you say about the customer situation, because I think what's working there as well is that I don't care if it's you, it'll be somebody else. Like there's no loyalty to the person in front of you, because if you don't work out, there's lots, right? Whereas we didn't have that. Like when we were growing up, I mean, even today, think about people in their marriages, more today than ever. Hey, if this doesn't work out, you just go get another one. And what I have learned, having done that, I've learned that, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. If you haven't changed, if you haven't recognized your illness in it. But the customer thing is like in this world market, in a market where I don't care, they can lose friends so easily. And it's heartbreaking because if you would just say you were sorry, or if you would recognize that you stepped on somebody's toes with your loose, reckless comment, if you cared about the value of that relationship that you developed, you would say, oh, I don't want to lose you as a friend. But today, it's like, whatever. And I don't see how, I can see how hard it would be for our children to develop deep, meaningful relationships if they feel like whatever, and I kind of sums it up. Like, I can't stand the whatever. It's like, whatever doesn't exist when you want to eat. When you turn the water on and it's hot, you're welcome. When you don't realize, and of course you don't want to enumerate to your children all the things that you do for them, but I abhor that, whatever mentality, or the thing that looks a lot like it, like playing stupid. Just why I don't know how to do this.
No. Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, you have that phone, use it for good instead of evil. How about like the dumb question you're asking me? Why don't you use the phone to find out the answer to it? And it doesn't connect with them, which is interesting because I see my phone as like, ooh, I can find out who this is or what that is, or, anything I want. Right. Whereas they don't see it as that, which is interesting. They'd rather bother you with it. What's 2 times the square root of blah, blah, blah? And you're like, well, number one, I don't know. But 2, come on, man, and here we are at this point talking about technology. It's like the technology, we're saying we're building it for one thing, but we're using it for another thing. Right? Isn't it apparent? Elizabeth, go ahead. I mean, I'm sorry to keep on going, but I mean, you build a phone to contact the police and the emergency services, and then people use it to gossip, right? It's just where we take it. Go ahead.
So first off, by the way, my kids have me labeled in their phone as parole officer mom. So I think that that's hysterical that you guys say that. It's literally comes across their screen as parole officer mom with a little like cop's cap. And then they have like a gavel.
No.
Like,
But you know what? If they were ever in harm's way, if you go back to, recent events where Elizabeth would be storming the school to get her kids.
Sure. Yeah.
A lot of other parents would not be. Right. And I think because of the way she manages her household, her bonds are very strong with her kids, probably stronger than the average parent.
Oh, definitely. I would think.
And, we laugh about it, but on the flip side, Elizabeth, when you're going through these training opportunities or these learning opportunities, do they get it? I mean, do your kids recognize that a stranger in Roblox holds little or no value compared to a sibling, a cousin, or a face-to-face friend? Do they truly understand that?
Right.
I would love to say yes. I mean, that would be a question for each of them, but I would love to say yes. Like, it's super important for me to put on them, like, your relationship with each other as siblings matters so much, because if me and dad won't be here forever, and when we're not here and you miss us, where do you think you're going to find that? Because we each gave you the best pieces of us. And when you're missing that, you're going to find that in your siblings. And if you're being a prick right now, or you're treating them like this or like this with each other, like, you're not going to have that when you get older. And I have that with my siblings and my parents as well. Like, a lot of the things that I do as a parent now, I am very blessed to say, like, I learned a lot from my parents. Like, I thought they were mean, I thought they were hard, but I know that they were doing not only the best with what they had, but I mean, they were just doing the best with what they had
Sure.
and
Right.
keeping us safe. And there was always good intentions. It was never like out to harm us. So that's really where I got a lot of it from. But I have that with my brothers, and I always knew that I would want my children to have that. And so when they do, like they still get at each other, but when disrespect comes out, that's when I'm like, that's
Mm,
where I get involved. I'm like, no, no. Would
yeah.
you be okay if somebody else was talking to me like this?
Yeah.
Would you be okay if you were talked to like this? And like if they're on their phone and they're like this, I will just stop talking.
Yeah.
We
Right.
won't. I will do it
Yeah.
with my dad.
Until
I'll do
there's
it with
that loud silence of wait, what did I miss? Right. Because I mean,
yeah.
inevitably, if they're paying attention, you just go, I mean, something's not right. You
Yeah,
know?
and I've always demanded attention. I don't care what you're doing. If I need to say something to you, and I mean, unless you're working on something or
Mm,
doing something in the middle of something like homework or building something or whatever. But if you're on a game, if you're just playing, I don't care if you're in the middle of a battle. Like if it's something that I need to say, you will stop and look at me because if you do not, there will be like I will shut it off and you'll just
right.
be done. Like
It's like,
there is that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, 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 go ahead.
Um, it's like when you think about what is optimal for parenting is it's a constant job for sure, but it is you should be tweaking, not rebuilding,
Yeah.
you know? And so when you look at like people that are wrecked by large scale, fallout in their homes, you know, I've known parents who have had kids that they said are great kids, but from my point of view, I was like, oh, this is a sociopath, right? They know all the right things to do, but when they're not in this house, man, they are some other thing, right? It's just obvious to me. And I've been very rarely wrong. In those cases, when those people are faced with like the truth of all that, when they're asking themselves, well, what do we do? I want to say to them, not a thing, because you're rebuilding something that is already built, and you can't tear down the structure, right? The optimal thing is you should be just tweaking. Hey, okay, that's enough, and that should be enough. Sometimes with every kid, you play the game, you got into it as a game, and they start one-upping you and one-upping you, and inevitably you're like, okay, that's enough. But that's with every relationship, is knowing, okay, this is I've gone too far, or, they've had enough, whatever. But that's tweaking. It's not when you meet somebody who is so uh I mean, if people with syndromes that can't feel the temperature in the room when they come in and say stuff and do stuff, and they are typically have some type of syndrome because, it's a whole handful of inappropriate all the time. Not that they mean wrong, but that, with your children who when they're having a bad day. And I think it goes back to another thing. It's like, do not frustrate your children. Don't frustrate them. That's kind of the number one thing that I took out of all of the parenting advice from the Bible at the time when I was like really trying to figure out what it's all about. Don't frustrate your kids. And if you're just tweaking, you're not. But I've watched my kids trying to raise their kids, and I watched them wind these kids up and get them wound up. And then they spaz out and then they want to shut them down. I'm like, you wound that kid up, man. Right? Like you pushed and you pushed and pushed, and now you got this. And it was funny. And I go, how do you not realize how damaging that is to the efficacy of being a parent when you need to say, stop, don't, because you have to, right? And you hope that they will take a breath long enough, even when they're in love, even when their heart's breaking, that they will fall back into the arms of the first love, which is their parent, and go, I don't know what's going on. okay, take the reins. But if you don't have that and the community's doing it, they lose empathy and sympathy, not being helpful, but empathy, and they're gone. There's no, I haven't seen many who have been able to develop appropriate levels of empathy when they didn't have it when they were kids. You know.
And the problem is these kids will look for it somewhere else, and that's what gives these predators in these games
Oh
that your
yeah.
children are getting on access to them. Like
Sure.
a few of the ones that I had looked up to, or not looked up to, looked into and read. Like one girl was 13. She thought she was talking to another 13-year-old girl. She didn't have a fabulous home life. Parents weren't really there. There were issues there. This person messenger in a game, and then they decided to share pictures so they could verify who they are, blah blah blah. And then the girl claimed that she was in modeling, and it wasn't a girl, it was a grown man. Claimed that she was in modeling, sent her some photos of that, and was like, oh my gosh, I think you're so pretty, you should do it, and started to get her to send photos. And at first it was just, like head stuff, and just kept building her up.
Oh yeah.
Obviously was lacking at home. And then those pictures turned into bathing suit photos. And then from there, it just progressed. And then all of a sudden, they were like it came out who that they were. And they were like, where are you? Like, we want to meet, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no, I'm not comfortable, blah, blah, blah. And then they were like, this is who we are. Like,
Yeah, right.
Yeah, either tell us, or we're going to send this to your parents. We're going to do this.
Yeah.
And she did, out of fear. I mean, she's 13 years old. I think about my year-old son, and I'm like,
Right.
gosh, like it's so easy. And they came and they wound up raping her, and it took her a while, but she did finally go to the police. But by then it was already too late.
It's
and then
too late.
Yeah, it's too late. And then a completely another one that I had watched was a kid at home. Mom let him play games, blah, 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 in a chat room. And one person said that they knew who this other person was, or they thought it was, and a bunch of boys playing. And this guy said that he worked for a gaming company, blah, blah, blah. He helped build them, and then got in this kid's head, was like, oh, you have really great ideas. You're really great at this. I should help you get into this field. You could make this much money, blah, blah, blah. You should come meet me. The kid goes and hangs out a few times, and then things got a little weird. Like that the mom read and was like, no, like this is done. And then of course, by then he was upset and decided he was going to rebel against his mom. And the guy was like, you can come stay with me, blah, blah, blah. So he does, he runs away. He goes and stays with him. The mom doesn't hear from him for a few days, gets a hold of the friends, finds out like how to get in, get the address, and they wind up going, and he had murdered him. Like,
oh my God,
it murdered him. And these are things that, like, I've shown my kids. I'm like, this is real.
Yeah, it happens for sure.
For the parents, or the parents that are listening to this, I want you to think about it. Go back to before technology. If I were going to be a predator, I have got to do all of this face to face, which brings a lot of challenges.
Right.
Because I have to do it in public.
Yeah. I
have to present myself as an adult immediately.
Right.
So what they're doing online is you can represent yourself as a child. You can be whoever you want. And these guys are having dozens of conversations simultaneously.
Sure. Right. So it's a shotgun approach. I mean, they don't have to rush, which is a settling kind of thing for somebody. Oh, they're not in a rush. So it doesn't feel as aggressive, right? I mean, which is refreshing when you meet people that you're like, oh, cool. This is just really cool. But I wanted to go back to what you said, Elizabeth. There was a Netflix documentary about Nickelodeon, and one of the it was basically these child actors who were sexually abused, assaulted by a vocal coach, I guess his name. And it's interesting because you brought up how, you as a parent are trying to save your children from harm, and they don't always want to be saved, right? Now, of course they do. They just don't realize it, right? In this one case, this one actor, African-American young kid, it was starting to happen to him, and his mother would be on set, and she was like, no, You're not gonna, and he's like, Mom, you're gonna, because Hollywood is that way. Like the way Hollywood rapes you is you go into the room where the raping takes place. And that's because on the other side of that rape door is the future. Now, older people done it, children too, but a parent watching this unfold, she's like, no, she puts her foot down. This kid is out of the business. Shortly thereafter, hates his butt, doesn't even have doesn't even have a relationship with her to this day, even though he's on this program saying, "Yep, this happened, that happened. I see it now, but the damage is done." So this mother, who I was like, "Oh God," I mean, and you wonder, that's how Michael Jackson was able to do what he did, because, well, he's not touching them. What do you mean he's not touching them? What are you talking about? Well, it's Michael, and he's Michael Jackson. He's the top entertainer in the world ever, right? They were dazzled by that. But this mom was like, oh no, this is wrong. And she's paying for that to this day, which is really not the end of the story you want it to be, right? But that's the truth that's that burden of responsibility of a parent. It's like, I do what I must do. And if I'm wrong, I will pay for that at another level, not here, you know. And I've been in that situation with my kids. I know that for us, we talk about it. It's like being right isn't a bulletproof vest. And yet, there's so many times it's like, this is going to end badly, or this is going to be a fight I don't want to have. But I look at it like this: as a mental health counselor, if somebody comes to me and I glean that they are a danger of themselves or others, I don't have a choice anymore. I don't get to go, well, nope. I have that cutoff switch. And I think every parent, every school teacher, everybody needs to have that, because we lose children because we are like, well, I don't know. But there's some of us that when we feel it, we can't turn away from that. And I imagine, Elizabeth, you're like that as well. It's like when something don't seem right, you're not going to go, well, you're going to be like, what's going on? And the conversation you may not like, but that's the key though. I think for anybody listening, is the key is that when an addict is telling you how much they drink, you got to look at that like it's normal. You can't go, oh my God, it's the end of the world, right? Because they will stop telling you. Like the amount of booze that they say they drink that surprised you is not the amount of booze they really drank. But if you go, oh, okay, yeah, no, I get it. And they're like, okay, well, it's 2 cases of beer a night. All right, yeah. But that's hard to do when you're so emotionally involved with your children. And I know that everybody in this room has been in that, like, okay, I said I was going to listen. I'm not, especially as husbands and to wives, it's like, I said I would listen, and she said she doesn't want me to solve this, but I already know where it went wrong. Like I already know the step that she took that is wrong, and now I got to listen to 10 more minutes of this when I could just say, no, it's just step to, right, Forrest?
Yeah, I kind of have a question for Elizabeth. I was just kind of digesting what you're saying. And you have 2 paths that you could take. And Elizabeth, in the journey that she's gone through with her kids, she didn't have a choice. But what happened is that she got kicked in the gut hard.
Yep.
With what happened to her. And what that's done for her is it's made her strong enough to put her foot down, regardless of the consequences in her relationship with her kids. She's putting the safety and the well-being of her kids over everything.
Yeah, she's seen the horror.
Now,
she can't ignore it. Yeah.
The lesson that I would like people to listen to is that you have to figure out how to do that before you have to deal with something that's tragic.
Yeah.
And those are the mistakes that, I'm dealing with different type of things that were kind of a death by 1,000 cuts. Elizabeth was just a flat out bat to the head scenario. And so she knows, she can see from a distance, here comes trouble, like a mile away, here comes trouble. We're going to deal with it at 3/4 of a mile, period.
Yep.
But parents all too often let this stuff creep up, creep up, creep up. And then they're like, how did I get here?
Yeah, right.
And if you take Roblox or if you take these games, this is a great example of how, okay, they're just playing video games. Okay, they're just doing this. Okay, they're just doing this. The next thing you know, your kids disappeared
Mm.
and you've got a huge life-changing problem.
Would you guys think that when we say they didn't see it coming, I just don't agree. Like, I think that they may say that out loud, oh my God, how did this happen? What's really bugging them inside is that they had indicators that they didn't act on. And I think that that's heartbreaking for anybody is to look back and say, I could have, we talked about that before. It's like, if I was, maybe if I did this, and I would say to those folks, you got to forgive yourself because, sometimes you just don't know. But I think that that's where we punish ourselves. We did see something. They got on Roblox and they did disappear to us. That child that was always off the wall that we were like, will you please go do something? Now isn't bothering you at all. Right. And that's when you should be afraid as a parent. It's like, why is the house so quiet? Right.
When your
I
toddler got quiet, what are they?
Yeah. They're into something or they're dead. Right. So they're into something or they're dead or on their way to being. And that is a terrifying thing to deal with. And unfortunately, parents who have lost their children to suicide, to murder, to rape, to whatever, bad relationships, my heart goes out to them because there's just no getting that back. And, it's unfathomable to think about those folks that have lost children to that scenario. And it happens every single day, so.
It does. I guess what I was kind of pointing out with Elizabeth and what I see in her is that she's willing to make an ultimate sacrifice for her kids' well-being. Yeah. If she sees something that they're not going to like her stepping on, she'll do it. They may not talk to her for a year, but she's willing to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing that parents, this is where, Elizabeth, don't you hear people say all the time, I want my kids to be my friend? Have you heard that?
I want my kids to like me and I want to be friends with my kids. No, like my kids have always known from the get-go, even before the situation that I was put in happened. Like I've always told my kids, my job is not to be your friend. My job is not to make you like me. My job is to be your parent. And when you become an adult, we can become friends. Right. But before then, that's not a thing. I'm not your buddy. I'm not your pal. I'm your parent.
You're not.
So there was always that boundary.
What you're talking about is the difference between building children and building citizens of the world that we want. Yeah. And because we know at some point they leave us. And if all you did was try to manage the child you wanted them to be without thinking about what it was going to be like for them as a citizen of the world, you failed. Right. It could have been wonderful at home. I mean, a lot of parents were like, oh, they were just so wonderful. They were like, yeah, but they were horrible at school. They were horrible to their friends. They're sociopathic, usury people. And it just never occurred to them that we are building citizens. That's the win. That's the reward of it. And for us, we
were wonderful by our parents' standards because of two things. Number one, you can't go out and play till your chores are done. And then once your chores are done, I don't have to look at you till the sun comes down. Yeah. So that was,
for them, it was definitely a whole nother level of, or at least the rubric of what was appropriate for them was very broad. You're like, well, they don't smoke and they haven't hurt anybody and they're not, they're still in school. Like we really had a big band of, things we could do and still be considered a good kid. I just wonder, these parents that are listening today or anybody that's listening today, I hope that we've given them, food for thought. And I will clarify this: if today is the day that you realize that you need to be that parent, don't confuse what I said as it's too late, because it isn't. Because if you are saying I need to be better today, then you can, and it will improve things over time. But it will be hard, right? It will be incredibly difficult because
It'll be a battle.
it is going to be a battle, and it's your battle to fight, their battle to lose. And when you think about what that it's as a leader, I was always told it's better to get softer than to get harder. You come in hard and you recognize who you're dealing with, and you start doling out the niceties and the things, and you start to realize what feeds their engine, right? But if you come in there going, come on, guys, don't we all want to do a great job? Well, that you're not a leader, because no, the answer is no. And they go, look at this guy. And then it just starts. And then when you go, nope, I'm putting my foot down, you've lost. You've lost the battle. And, I've seen that. I was not victim of that. Well, no, that's not true. There were times when I wanted to be everybody's buddy, but it made my job 10 times harder to do, despite how it looked on paper. But anybody got last words? Any final thoughts?
I mean, my biggest advice to parents would be, the biggest thing that I learned with the situation that my family was put through, I was already a hard parent, but it really taught me how to mold it in a different way and a different, better approach. And it's just worked so much better with my children. Like, now I educate them. Like, when I'm going to give you a reason that I'm going to be like this, I mean, there are going to be very few things now that I'm like, it's no, because I said it's no.
Yeah.
But with the rest of it, like, especially with the gaming part, like, I showed my kids both of those stories. I made them watch them. I'm like, This is real. So when I'm doing this, and I know you're not always going to agree with me, but where my parents didn't have that technology, you guys' parents didn't have that technology. Like, you could tell them, oh, this could happen, but that doesn't mean that they're going to believe it. Like, they don't hear about it. They don't know. Where I have the tools and I can use technology in a proper way now to be like, this is what this looks like. This is a real thing. And my kids were just like, oh my gosh, Mom, like, now I get why you don't let this happen. Like, it gives them that opportunity to see it firsthand from themselves and know that, okay, you really do want the best for me. And that's been a really good tool for me. And that was going through our situation. It was really educational to be able to do that and just approach it in a different way that is just so much better, honestly, in my moment.
I'm so glad for you. I mean, given what you've been through, you would say, when you see people that have gone through things, you would hope that life would become more friendly to them, and without being just easy, obviously. But I'm glad to hear that life is a friend to you, but you've made it a friend. Like, you've recognized one thing that we all have to recognize, that life doesn't care. The world out there, the nature is harsh. It rains on the just and the unjust. It doesn't hate you. It'll give you food if you tend to it, right? It'll give you shelter if you're paying attention. But that's really the thing. It's like, if you're paying attention, it all can work out. It's when you're just the hubris saying, it's fine, everything's fine, it's not going to be fine. And I'm just glad to see that, that you're on the team, but you also remind me of both the prison guard aspect, but what a graceful prison guard must look like. I can appreciate that. Forrest, you.
You're on mute.
I just they're mowing the lawn, so that's why I hit my mute. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I just want to implore the parents. I mean, and you said something that I've never thought about, JT, but it's a lot easier to go soft than it is to go hard. Yeah. And that's an interesting thing to really ponder. But honestly, if you can get your kids, whatever age they are, set their phones down, game night,
Mm,
bowling, something where you can interact with them. You don't have to talk
right.
politics or religion or music or, you know, but just that interaction, that
Yeah.
competitiveness, that I think is one of the best things that you can do to restore the dynamic, because you are competing. Not only are you competing with their friends and social media, but there's an average of 3 AIs that are talking to your kids 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Right. And you know, that's interesting because we talked about that before. The AI is listening to you all the time. And, you know, for good, bad, or different, but like, I certainly love when the AI tells me what I meant to say when I type it in the search bar, right?
For sure.
You know, he's like, you know what I mean? I know I didn't spell it right, but you know what I meant. But that articulation of you know the getting softer, I obviously mean, you know, when you set boundaries, boundaries are the way that you know, pets want boundaries. Everything wants a boundary because they want to feel safe, not to be hemmed in. So that's the difference of how you sell that. My wife would, if she was coming out, we got to bring her on one of these days because her dad made everything a lesson. If he was doing one thing and it was like, oh, look at us, we're doing game night, it was a lesson. It was directly tied to some lecture thing, you know. And she eventually she'd tell me, she'd be like, I I would be like, shoot me, kill me, but stop talking to me, stop lecturing me, right? And I think that that's the nuance, is that what you were saying for us is have fun with your children, man. Let them know who you are through the fun, you know, the building that relationship, that respect, right? Understanding your highs and your lows. Because if you're just coming in going, now see, what did we talk about? They're going to be like, jog on, you know, get out, right? They may not to your face, but certainly they're going to avoid you, as she inevitably did as well. And the guy's still that way. God bless him, you know. But
My
anyway,
dad is.
is he? Is he like that?
Yeah,
Well,
very
what did
much
we
so.
talk about? You know, I
Even
could
my
just
kids
hear
will
him.
be like,
Uh,
Dr. Feo just always gives lectures. Like,
well, you know,
yeah.
I
And I'm
mean,
all, welcome to my life growing up.
you know, it's like it sucks to this day when you say how hard your life is or something to your parents, because it is, and something they're like, well, you tell me about it. I'm like, oh, okay, so when was the last time that you know, like you paid $145 for 4 kids as child support in your day. I paid thousands of dollars. And the time, you can't go, well, that was 1970s. Believe me, you got off. Like, it's just the way that it seems very condescending. It's like, well, if you were paying attention, you know, I kind of told you that the thing. And you're like, that's why we're not real close. But I want my daughter, by the way, and just to wrap this up, is that she had a friend. She has a friend going through it. She's very close to this friend. I don't get to talk to my daughter because she's going to dance. She's doing this. She's going to be 15 very soon. She's a wind blowing through the house. And then all of a sudden she says, Dad, and I'm like, what? Is it money? What? You
What do
know,
you
is
want?
this, what is the thing? Right? I don't even say, what do you want? I was like, what's the thing? And she's like, my friend is going through this, da, 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 and I don't know what to do. And then I go, I've done my job.
Those are the
I don't get to
best.
do it. I don't get to do it. I don't feel like I'm doing it most days, but really, if you're a fire extinguisher, do you want them to use it every day? No. If they see you as the, I know who to call. I mean, and I believe at Forrest, you know, we've talked, despite the things that you've gone through, it always echoes that, well, they know where to go to. They know that you're not a maniac. You know, dad's going to be there. And man, if that's the best reward, then I'll take it, you know?
It is. You know, you're gonna have some parents. I want to go back to what you said, Forrest, about, you know, get out there and play with your kids. There are gonna be parents that have kids that are gonna push back, that don't want to play with them. So that's where you do something a little bit different. When you're in the vehicle alone together, go get ice cream, go pick them up for a doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
Ask them about things that you know they like, even if you know nothing about them, nothing about what they're talking about. That's where you start. Because once you
Mhm.
start that part of the relationship, them wanting to play a game with you or willing to will happen. Ask them
Yeah.
about if they're into video games. Ask them about the game. Be like, hey, I saw you
Yeah. Yeah.
playing this game. What's this about? Like, oh, and what's your favorite character? And what do you
Play
do?
it.
Like,
Play it with them.
play it.
Yeah.
That's what I had to do. I
Yeah.
learned to, when my son became 14, I learned to meet him where he was.
Yeah. That's it.
And that was really so beneficial. I'm super blessed to have those kids that do call when there's
Yeah.
an issue or come home from school. Like my son called me today. Like he has some things going on and he's trying to navigate. And he's like, I just knew that I could call you and you would still be my mom. And if I wanted that advice, you'll give it to me, but you're also going to listen to me when I screw
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
and you're not going to judge.
Right.
And
And
that's,
she's going to get that kind of lot. Look, when your kids are saying, please tell me,
yeah,
please tell me. And you're like, I want to tell you, but you got to own it. I could tell you my experience, but it took me at 45 years to figure some things out that
yeah,
you would think wouldn't take that long. So I'm here, you know, that kind of thing is just letting them see the underbelly and
yeah,
saying, I don't know, but we can figure it out together,
yeah.
you know. And
And once they hit a certain age, I've learned that you just listen. Unless they're asking you a specific question, sometimes they just need you to listen.
yeah, yeah. No, we started with that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like my wife would be like, I don't need you to solve this. I'm like, kind of think that you need me to solve it because that's typically the button you're pushing. But what she's trying to say is, I want to get it all out,
Yeah.
you know, because it's frustrated me. And it is incredibly hard not to recognize the first failing button and go, that's it. Don't press that button, you know, and it'll work fine. Right. When she didn't even get to the real part of the story, which you're like, oh my God, that's a problem with men is like, don't bury the lead. Tell me what this story is about when we get into it. Tell me what the big story. Let's go from the big story to the little story, not the little story to the big story, because you're losing me, you know, which there's the nuances, right? I know, Forrest, you know exactly what I'm talking. I mean, you both know, right?
But do you realize what the value that you're giving your child when you don't just jump in with that?
Yeah.
You're giving them the opportunity to figure that part out themselves. Like them
Yeah. Yeah.
saying it to you gives them that chance to
Right.
hear it and to either come up with their own solution or realize where they went wrong. And you're essentially setting them up for life because you're not going to be there forever to be able to do that. And it's really,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful thing to watch your children learn those things.
It just occurred to me what you said, and honestly, truly, even with my experience as a mental health counselor, is that what we indicate to our kids when we have the answer so fast is that they're stupid. When in fact,
that they're dumb and they
we
couldn't
don't fit right, because that's something that they will feel, even though it would look like that. It's not what we mean,
Yeah,
you know,
no.
but because of what we know, but it does indicate like how quickly we could come out with a solution or the thing. How, like, think about a math problem. If you were like, come on, man, it's like 14. And they're like, they're going to feel stupider because of how quickly you got there. Instead of, well, okay, let's take it. Let's go there. That has added value to me just now because it's the first time I ever really thought about. I use my skill and my knowledge to solve problems. And the faster I do that, the faster I can do what I want to do. But I now realize that I might want to slow play that a little bit so that they don't feel ignorant. And I'm not even talking about my kids right now. Anyway, guys, this is great. Forrest, you got any last words? Or you
No,
good?
I think you guys covered it.
Yep.
I actually have to deal with my middle child is asking to go somewhere, and he is restricted on driving because he's had 2 wrecks in the last, and I'm about to have to deal with that. If he thinks he's
Right.
going somewhere and he's not.
Oh, well, hey, man, all blessings to you, the wisdom of the ages, right?
Yeah.
All right. God bless you
What
guys.
are the consequences of your actions? How does this play out?
I love you, but no.
I
All
look
right.
forward to hearing how the conversation turns
Yeah,
out,
yeah,
though,
yeah.
especially with our conversation
Okay.
today. Like, maybe
Well,
we could learn something. I think that would be great.
pray for
Yeah.
me.
Well, on our next episode, we will find out what happens in this saga.
All right.